All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome to Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth, Part 7. So, disclaimer, uh, under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. So, once again, we're going back to Children of the Matrix by David Icke. The Dragon Kings. Hang on, I'm just going to blow my screen up so it's easier to read. Around 7,000 years ago, when Atlantis was finally destroyed, the extraterrestrial gods, the Anunnaki, left the planet during the cataclysm and returned when it was over. Wherever the surviving bloodlines of Atlantis and Lemuria resettled, advanced civilizations began to reappear. Egypt, China, and the Indus Valley, but the most significant became known as Sumer. Lawrence Augustine Waddell is a forgotten genius. He was Scottish, by the way. His highly decorated military career led him to travel widely across the Near and Far East. Waddell proved that the Sumer Egypt and Indus Valley cultures were the same empire, which is what I've been saying all along, ruled by the same leader, who also established in the British Isles and Ireland. This was the inherited knowledge later administered by the Druids. These rulers of the Sumer Empire were the white Nordic race. These bloodlines were of extraterrestrial origin, interbred with reptilian DNA, the Dragon Kings. And of course, you see King Ares from Game of Thrones here on the right. You know, when you read these fictional books with educated eyes, nothing's being hidden. You know, the whole idea of the Targaryens and the dragons and all this, it's all based on real life. Nordic colonies. Many strands of this Nordic race traveled to Sumer from Scandinavia and Northern Europe. These were the Normans who invaded Britain with William the Conqueror. These regions of Scandinavia and Europe were colonies of the former Lemurian Atlantean Empire. With the cataclysms came the ice sheets, and those who survived fled to France, the Netherlands, Holland, Belgium, and on down to the Mediterranean, the Middle and Near East, and India. Franz Camp is a Dutchman I met while researching this book, and we spent 2 days together swapping information. And notice the helmet there, by the way, of William the Conqueror on the left-hand side. It looks almost dragon-like, doesn't it? You know, when you kind of look, the details. Has that kind of dragonish theme, at least to me. Maybe I'm just reading into it too much, but it looks like that to me. But anyway, Ultima Thule. So Franz soon realized that to understand the world today, you have to research human history, particularly that of the Nordic peoples. The white race of Sumer had moved down from Northern Europe after the upheavals. He says they came from today's Greenland, one of the key secret societies behind the German Nazis was called the Thule Society, after Ultima Thule, one of the alleged origins of the master race in the far north. This Aryan master race was said to be blonde haired and blue eyed. Franz Camp says that the name Holland came from Halland in Scandinavia. He suggests that some of the leaders of the Scandinavian tribes were called Tuin, which became Tunis, John, which became Iona and Ionian, Geert, which became Geert Mannen or Geertman, later German. By the way, check out Unslaved for all this stuff. What Michael Tazarian says about the secret societies and the Nazis and all this sort of thing. Really good stuff, very educational. It doesn't matter to me that I fell out with Unslaved. I still recommend it. It's still a very good teaching tool. I haven't watched it for a while, but I was on it for a few episodes. Then I had a big falling out with David Whitehead, but that's another story. Anyway, I still recommend it. Though I'll never be on it again, more than likely. Nordic bloodlines. The Habsburg bloodline was Nordic or Viking originally, but they interbred with the reptilian race to form a genetic and political alliance. So did many others of the royal Nordic bloodlines. James Churchward, really good author, by the way. also documents the fundamental influence in the Sumer Babylon region of former Lemurian peoples via India. They want something very badly that is contained in the Nordic genetic code, the blonde haired, blue eyed race, with its connection to the reptilians, is crucial to understanding both past and present. Sumer was founded by the reptilian Anunnaki bloodlines in league with Nordic Vikings, and was thus known in the Viking language as the Land of the Dragon. Same race, different name. Same race, different names. So the name Aryan is a term for Nordic reptilian hybrids, the so-called master race or noble race. The very name Aryan comes from the word Ari, meaning noble one. Ali Waddell's brilliant research really begins with the foundation of Sumer around 4000 BC. He was an expert in Sumerian and Egyptian hieroglyphs and Sanskrit. This allowed him to travel these regions, reading the ancient accounts and temples and monuments. He discovered that the rulers of these three cultures were the same people under different names. It is the different names that have obscured the truth to a large extent. The endless gods in the various cultures also turn out to be different names for the same deities. The advantage that Waddell had over conventional Egyptologists and historians, I like that he puts historians in inverted commas, was that he could read Sumerian and could decipher inscriptions in Egypt. And this is what I was saying when I was doing the presentations with Jed. Where Commons Beaumont goes wrong is he just discounts anything that wasn't in Northern Europe or wasn't European. It's like the rest of the world either doesn't exist or doesn't matter. But here's David Icke saying that, Waddell, the value of Waddell's research, was that he was able to go to the East, to the Orient, to places like India, the Himalayas, and all this, and read the inscriptions in Sanskrit. No, the Orient was very important in human history, and it still is, especially when you look at the works of Colonel Waddell. Seeded bloodlines. The reptilian gods of Atlantis and Lemuria seeded these bloodlines. Waddell shows in his work Makers of Civilization that Sargon's Sumer-centered empire extended to the Indus Valley in the east, the British Isles in the west, encompassing much in between, and was larger than that of Alexander the Great or the Romans. Actually, the Roman Empire was actually fairly small when you compare it to others, but anyway. The Sumer Empire included much of the world, and it is from this same knowledge, the continuation of the knowledge and bloodlines of Atlantis and Lemuria. The Old Testament is founded on Sumerian accounts, edited and rewritten to create a manufactured history. The New Testament is based on the Sumerian and Golden Age religion of sun worship. King Sargon was a major sun worshipper, son of the sun, as they were in Lemuria. To the Sumerians, the sun was a symbol of God, and from this title, Son of the Sun, later came the idea of a son of God. And by the way, when you go to Edinburgh, the John Knox House, there's a little figurine on the side of the building, which is Moses kneeling before God, and God is presented as the sun, and it's in Greek, Latin, and English. Very interesting. Also, how John Knox was known as a second Jeremiah. So Christianity is a solar religion. It is. You're worshiping the Son of God, right? You just have to swap out one vowel, S-O-N to S-U-N. I am the risen Savior, as Jordan Maxwell points out. Yeah, the Son is your risen Savior, because if it doesn't come up in 3 days, we'll all be dead. The sun is your savior because, without the sun, the crops don't grow. Without the sun, we'd have no heat and light. Nothing grows without sunlight. The sun absolutely is your savior. It's not a man, it's an allegory for the. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. The one Lord. Could this mean a son of Sirius or even Lemuria? To the Sumerians, the sun was a symbol of God, and from this title, Son of the Sun, later came the idea of a son of God, or what the Baha'is call a manifestation of God, because I used to be one. That's got to be the one world religion. I've said that before, but it will be, I'm telling you. I actually put money on it. But, everything is being set up for them to take over in the future. Not right now, but down the line. Anyway, Sumerian emperors were also often known as the One Lord. The early official history of the Sumer satellite state called Egypt is largely based on King's List, compiled by an Egyptian priest known as Manetho in the 3rd century BC. Waddell shows that Manetho's work is fundamentally flawed and cannot be sustained in the light of the evidence. The span of the great Egyptian culture is broken up into distinct periods of kingdoms and ruling dynasties. King Sargon ruled Egypt from his Sumer base within the pre-dynastic period around 2700 BC. The right to rule in the Sumer Empire was by bloodline. The Egyptian inscriptions detailed here were discovered by Waddell to have been written in Sumerian hieroglyphs, not the much later Egyptian version. Sargon's grandfather was known as Tahu or Tekai uh, in the early Sumerian style Egyptian hieroglyphs, as Tuk in the old Sumerian kings lists, and as Vritaka or Dritaka in the Indian kings lists. Quote, inscriptions relating to King Sargon himself were discovered in one of the oldest tombs of Abydos, I guess is how you say that, in Upper Egypt, and Waddell established that the script used was early Sumerian. It was the same as the script he saw in Sumerian seals of the same Sargon period found in the Indus valleys. All these kings of the Sumer Empire were given solar titles because of the obsession and emphasis of the worship of the sun and the symbolism of the sun as god. It is likely that Horus or Haru, the Egyptian son of God, came from the Sumerian word hu or ha, meaning hawk, the storm god. The hawk or sun hawk was a Sumerian symbol for the sun. It was also the symbol of the Roman Empire as well, and the Nazis and all the rest. As we see above in Sargon's very title, the Heru of the Pygmy people, Hulkan of the Indians, Helios of the Greeks, and Hurkai of the Akkadians, Chaldeans of Mesopotamia probably come from the same source and all relate to a sun god of the Horus mold. Yeah, of course. In the same way, the Mayans of Central America had a god called Huracan, and the Tibetans had the deity Huraka, which later evolved into Heracles and Hercules of the Greeks, a society that was founded on the Sumerian, meaning Atlantean, knowledge and beliefs. Hercules fought a shape-shifting river god called Achelous. Achelous. The word hurricane can be traced to the same storm god symbolism. What I am surmising here is just some of the fantastic wealth of evidence that can be found in Waddell's work. I'm with him on that one 100%. That Sumer was the center of a vast empire that created, controlled, and instilled its belief systems into other great civilizations. So, in other words, it was the middle of it all, it was the center of all of it. They're just offshoots of Sumer, is where Mike is going, I think. The strong wild bull. So, the island of Crete was the center of the advanced Minoan civilization, another colony of the Sumer Egyptian Empire, and Menes established laws said to have come from Zag. The son of Minos was a bullman, or Minotaur. The son of Menes was known as the strong wild bull. That truth is this: the astonishing cultures across the ancient world were all aspects of the same culture and control based on Sumer, and the knowledge base of Sumer, found all over the ancient world, had their origins in Atlantis and Lemuria. The Sumerian remnants and inscriptions were known as or inspirations, I should say. The Sumerian remnants and inspirations were known as the Amorites, the Hittites, Phoenicians, Goths, Hamites, Indo-Aryans, Nordics, ancient Greeks, and many other names. What we call Aryan are the Nordic reptilian hybrids. History records the existence of the Hittites and the Phoenicians, but as different peoples, not as different names. That's the crucial difference. The Phoenicians were the Carian people, and Carian means serpent people of the Atlantean fire god. The Carian people, originally from Lemuria, also settled in the Americas. More of the same. Unmistakable Phoenician remains have been found in Brazil, and similar Phoenician artifacts were discovered in the rainforests of Queensland, Australia. The Queensland find would help to explain why some Australian Aboriginal terms are the same as the Egyptian, although the Lemurian connection would do that also. Evidence of Phoenician activity has been identified in New England, and unmistakable Egyptian Oriental remains were discovered in the Grand Canyon in Arizona in the first decade of the 20th century. Ancient Chinese artifacts have also been found in Mexico and California. What a surprise! Doesn't come as a surprise to me. They reinforced the stories and symbols that were taken to those areas thousands of years earlier by the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. When the later Europeans landed in the Americas with Columbus, they found to their astonishment that the native peoples were telling the same stories and myths that were told in Europe and the Middle and Near East. Quetzalcoatl. Their astonishment came from their belief that these cultures on different sides of the world had never met before. But they had. Not only had they met before, they were the same culture, just slightly different names. They were part, this is all covered, by the way, in Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. We'll get into that in the future. This backs all this up completely. Anyway, they were part of the global Atlantean Lemurian Empire. The corresponding stories and customs on both sides of the Atlantic include a virgin birth, crucifixion, circumcision, and the Great Flood. The key Central American deity, Quetzalcoatl, was Jesus under another name long before the Christian religion waded ashore with Columbus and Cortez. Indeed, when Cortez landed there in the years after Columbus, he was treated as a god because he was considered to be the return of Quetzalcoatl. Something similar happened in Africa when the white Europeans arrived and the native people believed they were the return of the Nordic extraterrestrial beings. That's why they were able to just walk in and take over. The gods of Sumer. The travels of the Aryan Sumerians and their earlier Golden Age ancestors also account for the mystery of the countless legends in the Americas of the white gods who came from the sea, bringing great knowledge and civilization. There was once a race of white men in Central South America who wore beards and looked like Phoenicians. Looked like Phoenicians. They were Phoenicians. Never mind the look like part. The Central American culture, with its incredible ancient cities and pyramids attributed to the Maya people in the Yucatan, is one such example of this ancient interaction. The step pyramids of the Yucatan go way back before the Maya who inherited them, are so similar to the classic ziggurats built for the gods of Sumer. There are great similarities in art and language, as there are between Central American religion and language and that of the Hindus and the Middle Near Eastern Semites. The mother goddess Maya was the same name in the Maya culture as she does in India, or has the same name. All these Maya peoples around the world originated in Lemuria or Mu. See, this is where Beaumont falls drastically short, discounting everything outside of Europe. Whereas I'm more on Ike's side on this. You have to look worldwide. And when you look worldwide, you find that all this was worldwide. The Atlantean Lemurian Empire, the Hittites and the Goths, the Phoenicians, in other words. Also, the legendary founder of the Maya culture called Votan or Wotan, oh, we'll get to that, is the name of the Atlantean fire god and also the god of the Teutonic peoples of Germany and Scandinavia. He was one of the gods of the Nazis, like I said earlier. That part of the Sumerian Empire known as the Phoenicians, with their base in Cappadocia, were very much involved in establishing Sumerian control of the British Isles. These peoples were known as the Hittites and the Goths. L.A. Waddell has established that the Phoenicians were not a Semitic race as claimed by official historians, but another name for the Aryan race. Examinations of Phoenician tombs have revealed that they were of the long-headed Aryan type, as are depictions of the pharaohs and royal families in Egypt. The Egyptians portrayed many of their gods like Osiris with white skin and blue eyes. The twist was that their royal and noble bloodlines had interbred with the reptilian Anunnaki. There is still a race of white, often blue eyed people in Kurdistan. Great Stone Circles. This corresponds with the period when it is claimed the Great Stone Circles, like Stonehenge and Avebury, were built with the same astonishing precision that you find with the Giza pyramids. Whoever designed Stonehenge must have had a very advanced knowledge of mathematics and astronomy. And we'll get into all that in the future, the stone circles, the dolmens, the cromlechs, and all that. We'll revisit that in the future a few times, I would imagine. Geoffrey of Monmouth, the 12th century historian, wrote that the builders of the original Stonehenge were giants from North Africa. The Aryans of Sumer and Egypt were a tall people because they came from the very tall Nordics and the reptilians. As John A. Keel points out in Our Haunted Planet, got that over there on the shelf, really good book. We'll get to that also in the future. We are also asked to believe that they pushed and hauled these monstrous stones up and down hills, across rivers, through forests and soupy bogs on sledges and wooden rollers. Plainly, the whole thing is absurd. All you have to do is think about it a little bit, you know, ask questions, curiosity. Atlantean builders. Others began to move across land to settle in what we now call France or Germany and the rest of Northern Europe. Wherever they went, the reptilian bloodlines invariably ruled as kings, queens, and nobility. Stonehenge is just one of hundreds of stone circles and standing stones erected in Britain in this same period. Check out The Spine of Albion by Gary Biltcliffe as well. In fact, check out all his books. I've got them on the shelf over there. I remember I was going to do something with that over a year ago, and I just kind of forgot about it. Apologies about that, by the way. But I will get back to that book at some point, I'm sure. I remember I was going to create like a Patreon account, and only read like the first 5 minutes, and then if you want to listen to the rest, you have to go into the Patreon thing, and then you can unlock the rest. Well, I kind of abandoned that idea in the end. I thought it was a bit greedy, but I will get back to Gary Biltcliffe's books at some point. I have to round all this up with Beaumont and David Icke first, though. But anyway, back to this. Where was I? Stonehenge is just one of hundreds of stone circles in the same period. The Sumerians were heading back to where the pre-cataclysmic Atlanteans once had a major colony, and some of these famous structures may have already been in place long before they returned. Either of these explanations, the Atlantean builders or the Sumerian Empire, would account for where the knowledge came from to align them so exactly to the cycles of the sun, moon, and star systems, as well as in relationship to each other via the geometrical energy grid. Waddell explains he found Sumerian markings on one of the stones at Stonehenge and on other stones around the British Isles. Particularly this whole area in the southwest of England, and Wales. This is a really, really important area. I want to go there someday. From Atlantis and Lemuria. Professor Alexander Thorne, how do you say this? Emeritus Professor of Engineering Science at Oxford University from 1945 to 1961, discovered that the builders of Stonehenge knew of Pythagorean geometric and mathematical principles thousands of years before Pythagoras was born. The same was true of those who built the Giza pyramids. The Greek genius Pythagoras, which means I am the Python, and all the famous Greek mathematicians, philosophers, scientists, doctors, and so on, inherited their knowledge through the highly secretive mystery schools inherited from Atlantis and Lemuria. The Sumerian elite and their Golden Age ancestors also had the knowledge of how to throw a magnetic field around an object and disconnect it from the laws of gravity. Such a skill makes it so much easier to move and place vast stones for structures like Stonehenge and the pyramids. Like David Icke always says, everything's on a frequency level. It all becomes clear when you remember that. Earth energy grid. I cannot stress enough the importance to these ancient peoples of the global energy grid, and especially the major vortex points. This energy was often symbolized as a serpent. The more esoteric researchers who acknowledge the vast symbolism and references to serpent bloodlines, serpent knowledge, and serpent people say these were merely codes relating to this Earth energy grid known as dragon lines or ley lines. The association of serpent symbolism with this universal energy is clear to see, but the evidence that there is a controlling force taking our reptilian form is so overwhelming that there is no way that the constant references to serpents or dragon bloodlines can be dismissed. Magnetic energy, and the map on the left-hand side is straight out of Gary Biltcliffe's work, uh, The Spine of Albion. Really good book, by the way, if you get the chance to read it. And like I say, I will return to that at some point. I kind of dropped it and forgot about it, but unfortunately, but I will return to it. I do intend to do that. I do promise I will go back to that work someday. I'm just so caught up at the moment and trying to round off Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth and get all of the presentations by Beaumont complete, which is going to take a while. Um, I want to get that all done and out of the way, and then we'll go back to Barry Biltcliffe, or I might hold off on it until we get around to doing dragon lines and stone circles, because I've got so many books, so many sources on all that. There's just so much to do. There's so much to do. I really wish this was my full-time job. I wish I could find a way to make money out of this. Well, I did before, think of a way, putting videos up on Patreon, and you have to pay, and you get to watch the rest of the presentations. But in the end, I didn't want to do that. Let me know in the comments, is there a way to do this and make money out of it? I wouldn't be doing it for the money, but the reason I say that is if I had more time that I could concentrate just on this, you know. Oops, I keep hitting the microphone. But I wish that this was my job, just doing this and nothing else. But anyway, let's finish off on this slide, because we're getting up on half an hour now. I don't want to go too long. So magnetic energy, and what a coincidence that we have all the legends and accounts of a serpent race bringing and teaching knowledge about this grid, and the energy of that very grid becomes associated with the serpents. These ley lines connect to form a web or a grid of magnetic energy, the universal life force, which flows along these lines that surround and interpenetrate the planet. The human body has a similar system, and the ancient Chinese healing art known as acupuncture works with the ley lines of the physical body. They are balancing the flow of energy. The ancients, including the Atlanteans, Lemurians, and the peoples of the Sumer Empire, used standing stones like acupuncture needles for the earth. Also, when you hear things about, serpent this or dragon that, never automatically think that it's evil, because that's what I used to do. But I think you're selling yourself short if you're going with that tunnel vision. The serpent actually represents wisdom. Remember in the book of Matthew, be ye as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. One of the most famous and oft quoted passages out of the book of Matthew in the Bible. So we are encouraged even by the Lord himself, the solar God Jesus, to be as wise as serpents. So just remember that, to be as wise as serpents means to be knowledgeable. It doesn't say act like serpents. He says be as wise as serpents. In other words, be educated, be knowledgeable. The serpent represents wisdom, but it can also represent the temptation to use knowledge to gain power and use power, and that's where power corrupts. I don't think there's anything inherently evil about serpents or serpent symbolism, but it can often be taken that way from the Christian perspective. Whereas if you're really paying attention to the book of Matthew, the Lord himself is telling you to be as wise as serpents, you know, um, but as innocent as doves. You have to kind of meditate on sayings like that and kind of think more deeply about what they actually mean, what's being told to you there. Anyway, half an hour is plenty for one video. To tell you the truth, I want to keep going, but I don't want to bore the arse off people at the same time. So thank you for watching, and have a nice day.